We just heard live the briefing of the Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson Arindam Bagji. He spoke on a number of issues. The topmost, of course, is the renewal of the travel of pilgrims through the Kartarpur corridor to Pakistan. That will take place in just about less than a week from now. That's through the Kartarpur corridor, and they'll be visiting a number of gurudwaras there, including the Nankana Sahib Gurudwara, and many others were mentioned as well. So this is a positive development because since March 2020, the travel of pilgrims because of COVID-19 had stopped, but this is a renewal, and the External Affairs spokesperson expressed hope that this pilgrimage can go on, and more jathas, more groups of pilgrims can visit these places of pilgrimage across the border from Pakistan. The travel will be through the Atari-Wagah border. And he also mentioned the reaction that has been generated because of the NSA's meeting on the issue of Afghanistan, the Delhi dialogue, and the issue of access was mentioned, that India has been seeking unimpeded access, and that has been an issue because, again, Pakistan lies in the way. And apart from that, the report that came from the US Department of Defense about China building villages in Arunachal Pradesh, or close to the Arunachal Pradesh border, that's not been properly delineated. He said that we've taken note of the issue. There are many other questions, and we will have reports on that for you later on as well. But right now, we are going ahead with World Today because it is time for World Today now, and we get you all the updates from around the world. In this particular show, I'm Gautam Roy, and topmost, of course, is what is happening in Glasgow with COP26, because time is really running out over there for all the negotiators. So we'll get you all the updates from there as well. But first, the headlines. The MEA says that a very serious concern on humanitarian situation has been expressed in the NSA's meeting. Pakistan was invited for the NSA level talks but did not come, and this shows their attitude towards Afghanistan. Delhi declaration is a result of fruitful NSA level talks. In a surprise announcement at COP26 Climate Summit in Glasgow, US and China agree to boost climate cooperation over the next decade. The two countries release a rare joint declaration promising action. The United Nations COP26 Climate Summit turns its focus to climate change and action in the world's cities on day 11, with many of the world's cities located on coasts, putting them at greater risk of sea level rise and storm surges caused by extreme weather events. The European Commission and the US agree to broaden their sanctions against Belarus, while migrants from the Middle East, Afghanistan and Africa trapped in Belarus make multiple attempts to force their way into Poland overnight. Sudan's main civilian political coalition rejects any negotiations with the military, holding to its position at its first press conference since a coup on the 25th of October. And NASA and Spacex launched 4 astronauts into orbit en route to the International Space Station, including a veteran spacewalker and 2 younger crewmates chosen to join NASA's future lunar missions. Also, 26 works of art seized by French colonial soldiers in 1892 returned to Benin, a landmark in the long fight by African countries to recover looted artifacts. And in sports, Canadian Felix Auger-Aliassime beat Filip Krajinovic at the second round of the Stockholm Open. Former world number 1 Andy Murray beats Italy's Yannick Sinner in a straight sets in the second round to face Tommy Paul next. Time to begin World Today with big news. Well, time is running out for climate negotiators at COP26 in Glasgow. With just a day left, the UK presidency of the Global Climate Summit put out a draft agreement which falls short of the expectations of countries like India on the climate finance and more ambitious nationally declared contributions on cutting emissions is concerned. But US and China sprung a pleasant surprise by striking their own climate pact, and there were more pledges as well, even involving big car makers to make zero-emission cars. Take a look.
Countries are being urged to strengthen their carbon-cutting targets by the end of 2022 in a draft agreement published at the COP26 Glasgow Climate Summit. The document says vulnerable nations must get more help to cope with the deadly impacts of global warming. It also says countries should submit long-term strategies for reaching net zero by the end of next year. Critics have said the draft pact does not go far enough, but others welcomed its focus on the 1.5 degrees Celsius target. The document, which has been published by the UK COP26 presidency, will have to be negotiated and agreed by countries attending the talks. Scientists have warned that keeping the temperature rises to 1.5 degrees Celsius, beyond which the worst impacts of climate change will be felt, requires global emissions to be cut by 45% by 2030 and to zero overall by mid-century. With the world off track to meet the goal, the draft document urges countries to revisit and strengthen the targets for cutting emissions by 2030 in their national plans to align them with the Paris Agreement goal of well below 2 degrees Celsius or 1.5 degrees Celsius by the end of 2022. Loss and damage, an issue of key importance to the developing world, has been included in the draft, calling for more support from developed countries and other organizations to address the damage caused by extreme weather and rising seas in vulnerable nations. It also recognizes that more finance is needed for developing countries beyond the long-promised $100 billion a year by 2020, which will not be delivered until at least 2022. But campaigners say these parts of the text are weak and essentially a box-ticking exercise. The document also calls on countries to accelerate the phasing out of coal and subsidies for fossil fuels, but has no firm dates or targets on this issue. It also asks UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres to convene world leaders in 2023 to consider how efforts to reach targets for 2030 are shaping up. The United States and China have agreed to boost climate cooperation over the next decade. In a surprise announcement at the COP26 Climate Summit in Glasgow, the two countries released a rare joint declaration promising action. It says both sides will recall their firm commitment to work together to achieve the 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature goal set out in the Paris Agreement. They called for stepped-up efforts to close the significant gap that remains to achieve that target. China's top climate negotiator, Shai Zhenhua, told reporters that on climate change there is more agreement between China and US than divergence.
Climate is a common challenge faced by humanity and will impact the well-being of future generations. It's becoming increasingly urgent and severe, turning a future challenge into a crisis happening now. In the area of climate change, there is more agreement between China and the US than divergence, making it an area with a huge potential for cooperation. With 2 days remaining until the end of the summit, we hope this joint declaration will be China and US's contribution to its success.
US climate envoy John Kerry meanwhile said the agreement with China was a statement of support for a successful United Nations climate summit, with both taking a step towards closing the emissions gap. Kerry said the US and China had no shortage of differences, but on climate, cooperation is the only way to get this job done.
Now, the two largest economies in the world have agreed to work together to raise climate ambition in this decisive decade. Together, we set out our support for a successful COP26, including certain elements that will promote ambition. But let me be clear, this declaration is a step that we can build on in order to help close the gap. The United States and China have no shortage of differences, but on climate, cooperation is the only way to get this job done. This is not a discretionary thing, frankly. This is science. It's math and physics that dictate the road that we have to travel.
EU climate policy chief Franz Timmermans said it was really encouraging to see China and the US working together.
That's good news. It's really encouraging to see that those countries who were at odds in so many areas have found common ground on what is the biggest challenge humanity faces today. It shows that also the US and China know this subject transcends other issues, and it certainly helps us here at COP to come to an agreement.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson urged world leaders to go further in their pledges at the climate conference in Glasgow, saying the goal of limiting the global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius remained within reach. He said a UN climate change summit had made progress towards halting runaway global warming, but more was needed to seal a deal. Johnson said that there may not be any solution to climate change right now at this summit, but he expressed hope there is the possibility that the summit will come away with the first genuine roadmap for a solution to anthropogenic climate change. He expressed hope that there would be some of the types of solutions that the world needs to adopt.
We're not going to arrest climate change right here, right now. That is just impossible. But there is the possibility that we will come away from this with the first genuine roadmap for a solution to anthropogenic climate change that I can think of in my lifetime. And the most depressing thing about climate change has been that it doesn't really look as though it's capable of being fixed anytime soon. I think what you could have is some of the types of solutions that the world needs to adopt to do it.
With only days left at the United Nations COP26 summit, Johnson travelled to Scotland to try to chivi other leaders to hand their negotiators more room to reach agreement on the thorniest issues of finance and emissions target. Johnson's intervention in the frantic final hours of the two-week summit in Glasgow came as a draft text urged countries to boost their emissions-cutting goals by 2022. The Glasgow Declaration on Zero-Emission Cars and Vans, unveiled at climate talks in the Scottish city, sees the group's pledge to rapidly accelerate the transition to low-carbon emission vehicles, aiming to green leading markets by 2035. Headline signatories include Ford and General Motors, the world's second most populous country, India, and major corporate purchasers of vehicles including LeasePlan, which rents 1.7 million cars in 30 countries. But the world's top two car makers, Toyota Motor Corp and Volkswagen AG, as well as major car markets of China, the US and Germany did not sign up, highlighting the challenges in shifting to zero emissions. One of the COP26 goals is to secure global net zero by mid-century and keep 1.5 degrees temperature rise within reach. Countries are being asked to come forward with ambitious 2030 emissions reductions targets that align with reaching net zero by the middle of the century.
We have been clear that the overarching aim of this COP is to keep the Paris temperature goal within reach. So it was clear that road transport, which accounts for 10% of global emissions, must be a priority. As a presidency, we have urged governments and manufacturers to commit to end the sale of polluting vehicles. And we decided to build up international collaboration to get the transition to zero-emission vehicles moving faster.
Meanwhile, a group of young delegates to the UN climate conference held a protest on Wednesday against a proposed carbon credit system they describe as worthless zombie credits. The protesters said the carbon credit system would not lead to reductions in CO2 emissions. Little Amal, a 3.5-meter puppet depicting a Syrian refugee girl, met Storm, a giant sea goddess, outside the COP26 summit in Glasgow. After walking thousands of miles across Europe, Little Amal reached the UN summit on November 9th to raise awareness of the plight of refugee children on the front line of climate change. She interacted outside the venue with Storm, who is 10 meters tall and made entirely of recycled materials collected from washed-up marine litter. Little Amal represents hundreds and thousands of people displaced by climate change or other causes, said Tracy Seward from the BOC, the organization behind the puppet's journey. World Today Desk, DD India.
But at the same time, in a big boost to accelerate global adoption of solar energy, the United States of America has become the 101st country to join the International Solar Alliance to catalyze global energy transition through a solar-led approach. Signing the framework agreement, U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate John Kerry said, and I quote, "It has long been coming and we're happy to join the International Solar Alliance, which Prime Minister Narendra Modi took the lead in making. This will be an important contribution to more rapid deployment of solar energy globally." India welcomed the US as the 101st member of the ISA. Union Cabinet Minister for Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Bhupendra Yadav said, and I quote, "This move will strengthen the ISA and propel future action on providing a clean source of energy to the world." India's climate action has been gathering global acclaim even ahead of COP26. See how this year's UN Day was marked in partnership with the International Solar Alliance.
India is very responsible member and very actionable member, and we are working on the climate change.
India is now about to script history on climate action too, and we look forward to India's contribution to the upcoming climate conference.
We are at a stage where solar electricity today provides the cheapest electricity that is possible in this country at less than 2 rupees a kilowatt hour.
I studied chemical engineering, and 6 years back when I started from college, everyone started asking, is this your father's business, is this your husband's business? And people have those taboos that actually pull us down.
All three of us, along with other leaders, were able to break certain barriers and take climate action as part of our passion and also as a career.
We, as young people, have the potential to build ideas that can make a difference, that even the simplest of solutions matter.
What we heard today was the stories from young people all over India of the innovations, the new ideas and the solutions they are coming up with to deal with the challenge of climate change for India, but also for the world.
So while climate negotiators will be driving a hard bargain to reach some sort of an agreement based on that draft, which is being praised in certain respects but also getting a lot of criticism, India has been leading the way in terms of climate action as well. And to talk about it all, we have Mahendra Singhi, Commissioner, Energy Transitions Commission of the UK. Very good evening to you, Mr. Singhi. Just tell us in terms of how things are shaping up at COP26 and the kind of example that India has set in itself, still being a developing country, although a major economy as well, a large developing country. What can the world gather from it and put it into action where COP26 is concerned?
So happy to all the viewers. I'm very happy to share with all of us that the COP26 has created a climate of hope. There has been great interactions, great agreements in regard to how we can take actions which can bring good hopes to even our youngsters also, our grandchildren also, that all countries, all leaders, whether it's a country leader or the corporate leader, are working for clean climate. So I would like to highlight few important things.
Yes.
One is India has been able to make a big mark on the global climate scenario as well as with all global leaders by the presence of our beloved Prime Minister Modi ji and our Environment Minister Yadav ji, as well the commitment which India would make that we would be net zero by 2070, as well we will be enhancing our target of renewable energy from 450 gigawatt to 500 gigawatt, as well the specific commitments which have been made for bringing down our carbon intensity while keeping all options open for our economic growth of our people. So this has been one landmark. Second landmark has been that all countries have now one way or other agreed that we have to transition from coal power to thermal power, from thermal power to renewable power, and ultimately also should lead to hydrogen power also.
Yes.
Third important is that this time, first time, countries have been able to identify the big menace or the big danger of growing methane gases, because methane is almost 80 times harmful than the carbon dioxide. So now 106 countries have agreed that by 2030 they will be bringing down methane emission by 30%. So it's a big one. Fourth one is that the agreement by India, by US and China, that they would be working together for various climate actions. Nobody was expecting, but good part is that yesterday, with the great efforts which have been made by Senator John Kerry, US Special Envoy on Climate, and the Chinese people, they have come out with an agreement, and that has created great hopes that when two countries are together, then definitely many right things would happen. And now people are and the ministries are involved fully to finalize the agreement for international carbon market, green finance, and many other things. So I would say it looks quite positive, though many people can have many views, but I, being an optimistic person, a positive person as well, I, being in COP26 from 1st of November to 10th of November, I could see that whether it's a corporate, whether it's a young leader, whether it's a country leader, all are trying to make A, B, C efforts so that they can make their own country safe and whole globe safe. And lastly, I would say the one major statement and major initiative which Modi ji has given, and then he has been able to rope in many countries, is that under the leadership of Dr. Ajay Mathur, we will, under this International Solar Alliance, now we all would be working on one sun, one world, and one grid. So this will pave the way for 100% renewable energy in time to come, and everybody in the whole world will be able to get power from our Lord Sun all the time. So this has been major initiative, and if you wish, then I can also share certain more initiatives which businesses have taken.
Yes, certainly. I mean, there's been initiatives on the front of climate resilience as well, especially for the smaller countries in the oceans. And apart from that, when it comes to the draft agreement, India has also pushed for $1 trillion that should be set aside for climate finance. But here, the statement, the draft agreement really falls short on expectations. Not only has the $100 billion goal not been met, the increase is only, the call is there only for doubling the amount.
You're fully right, and in fact, under the leadership of India and few other countries, developing countries have very well again highlighted the importance of sharing $100 billion per year, and I'm sure in next 2-3 days something positive should come out. And second, the major decision we are expecting as an Indian corporate also, and otherwise the global corporate also, that all the countries should be able to agree on Article 6 of the Paris Climate Agreement, which says that we should create a homogeneous international carbon market. And the importance of this is that with this carbon market available, particularly developing countries will be able to, sell their carbon credits and would be able to raise finance for various clean projects. In past also, under Kyoto Protocol also, we had seen its benefit in reducing GHG's emissions. So this would help in a big way, and it looks like that in 2-3 days' time, this agreement may come up. In addition to this, one major initiative which has been declared by US President Joe Biden and efforts of Senator John Kerry and World Economic Forum, that now a coalition has been formed of major leading corporates of the world, that they would encourage the low carbon products, zero carbon products, and even at premium also, if this has to be purchased to encourage implementation of clean solutions, they would do that. And I'm very happy to share that Dalmia Cement has been one of the founding members. Earlier there were 20 members, and now the numbers have gone to 34, in which the corporates are our own India, Mahindra and Mahindra, then Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, and many other companies have joined this to encourage implementation of clean technologies. This is one. Secondly, a lot of things have been discussed on nature-based solutions.
Okay.
How we can encourage, one, afforestation, how we can stop deforestation, and thirdly, how we can create carbon sink, so that the nature-based solution is win-win situation for everyone. And
yes, and industries such as yours can be involved in that as well.
And many of you might be knowing that India has also committed a few months back that they would like to convert 26 million hectares of land into a useful land, which will not only create the carbon sink or the green plants, but at the same time, they would also be able to generate rural employment also. And as a responsible corporate citizen, Dalmia Cement has now also decided that they would be taking almost 2 million hectares of land from the government in various areas, and would also contribute in planting bamboo trees and others, which can be used in various other ways. Another initiative which has been taken by India and Sweden is about leading industry transition. In fact, under the co-chairmanship of India and Sweden, now action plan is being made out that how we would support each and every corporate, each and every country to lead industries for making certain changes in their technologies so that they can be low carbon industry and then ultimately net zero industry. And Dalmia Cement is also one of the founding member of this lead IT. So this would also go a long way in motivating industry as well as sharing the practices. And lastly on this, I may say that this time there has been a lot of talk on collaboration.
Yes.
Partnerships, not only with countries, but the corporates also. So there has been discussion about public-private partnership. There has been discussion about private partnership. And I think this would go a long way, because now people are coming out from that mindset, that this is my technology, this is my country, because now this global crisis, climate crisis, has opened up the mind of each and everyone. So I am personally very hopeful, my company is very hopeful that Dalmia Cement also will be able to do quite better in this scenario, because we have been one of the lowest carbon footprint cement companies in global cement world.
Okay. Well, hope also has expectation inherent in it. So my parting thought for you is that I hope that my expectations and your hopes, people who are negotiating the draft agreement also, they live up to it and produce something that becomes landmark as far as responding to climate change positively is concerned in just about, well, we know in about another 24 to 36 hours. Thank you so much for joining us for the moment.
Jai
Hind. Now, acting German Chancellor Angela Merkel has asked Russian President Vladimir Putin to intervene with Belarus over the migrant situation on that country's border with Poland. German Chancellor, at a joint conference with the Portuguese Prime Minister and Latvian Prime Minister in Berlin, said that she spoke on the phone with Russian President Putin and asked for his help in resolving the migrant crisis on Belarus's borders with Poland and Lithuania. And pressure is being brought to bear on Belarus from the European Union, that is the European Commission, and the US as well, in terms of tougher sanctions, a result of a meeting between European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen and US President Joe Biden. But none of it seems to be doing the trick for the moment. Migrants from the Middle East, Afghanistan and Africa trapped in Belarus are still making attempts to force their way into Poland.
The European Commission and the US have agreed to broaden their sanctions on Belarus. European Commission head Ursula von der Leyen announced the decision after meeting US President Joe Biden. Leyen said that the move will not only target personalities but entities too. Von der Leyen said the situation on the border between Belarus and Poland was not a migrant crisis but an attempt by the authoritarian regime of Minsk to destabilize its neighbors. The two leaders backed the territorial integrity of Ukraine. Von der Leyen and Biden agreed to look into the possibility of sanctioning airlines that facilitate human trafficking towards Minsk.
We will widen our sanctions against Belarus. So very rapidly at the beginning of next week, there will be a widening of the sanctions against Belarus. As far as I'm informed, the United States have prepared sanctions that will be in effect at the beginning of December. And these, the European sanctions will not only be against personalities, but also against entities. So it is important that the Lukashenko regime understands that their behavior comes with a price.
Meanwhile, migrants from Middle East, Afghanistan and Africa trapped in Belarus made multiple attempts to force their way into Poland overnight. The EU, which has repeatedly sanctioned Belarus for human rights abuses, accuses Minsk of drawing in migrants from war-torn and impoverished countries and then pushing them to cross into Poland to try to sow violent chaos on the bloc's eastern flank. In Poland, as the migrant crisis worsens at the border of Poland and Belarus, an NGO, Grupa Grancja, that supports refugees in the country will move the International Criminal Court in The Hague over the serious human rights violations. The organization monitors the border between Belarus and Poland, where thousands of migrants are stuck. World Today Desk, DD India.
And a United Nations spokesperson told the media that the UN has not received any official explanation from Ethiopia's federal government in Addis Ababa for the detention of 9 UN staff and at least 70 truck drivers contracted to work for the UN.
We have, as far as I'm aware, not received any official explanation, while a number of UN staff, as well as people who have been contracted to work for the UN, are in detention and continue to be detained.
So quite a tenuous situation there in Ethiopia as well. Let's now take a look at updates coming in from across the world on the COVID-19 situation. Well, the virus has infected more than 25 crore 20 lakh people worldwide. So far, the number of recoveries stand above 22 crores 81 lakh, while the disease has claimed lives globally of over 50 lakh 87,000 people. The US alone continues to contribute a majority of the cases of COVID-19 in the world's tally. The country's COVID-19 cases have crossed 4 crore 76 lakh and the death toll has surpassed 7 lakh 79,000. The number of COVID-19 patients in intensive care has touched 460 in South Korea, the highest number since the pandemic began. It surged by 26% in just 1 week. ICU patients are those who cannot breathe on their own and need to rely on ventilators to pump air and oxygen into their airways. The South Korean government says a surge in the number of critically ill patients is inevitable as the nation returns to normalcy. In Israel, a pandemic advisory board has backed rolling out Pfizer and BioNTech COVID-19 vaccines among children between the ages of 5 and 11 years. Israel's health ministry is widely expected to accept the panel's recommendations and begin administering the shots this month. Israel, a country with 9.4 million young population, has 1.2 million children in the age group. Health officials have been doubtful about that the country could reach herd immunity without children being vaccinated. The country has more than 13,35,000 cases of COVID-19, with fatalities crossing 8,100. In Ukraine, unvaccinated COVID-19 patients are flooding hospitals. The country's health minister, Viktor Lyashko, informed that 92% of COVID-19 patients in the country are unvaccinated. The minister also stressed that Ukraine could have a third fewer deaths every day if its vaccination rate was higher. COVID-19 cases and deaths soar in the Ukraine, reaching record highs in recent weeks. The country's government has imposed a lockdown to stem the surge and prompt vaccination. Ukraine has more than 31,30,000 cases of COVID-19. The country has lost over 74,200 lives to the disease. And it's time now to get you some more updates from across the world in a quick wrap.
Sudan's main civilian political coalition rejected any negotiation with the military, holding to its position at its first press conference since a coup on 25th October led by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. A statement read at the press conference attributed to spokesman Al-Watik El-Berer said the Forces of Freedom and Change, which had signed a 2019 power-sharing agreement with the military following the ouster of dictator Omar al-Bashir, rejected the coup and had not met with the military. The coalition said it supported Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok, who is under house arrest, but had not met with him, and joined him in demanding a return to pre-coup conditions. Mediation attempts since the takeover have stalled, and while lower-level appointments have been made, neither a cabinet nor a head of state sovereign council have been named. Burhan has said he is committed to the democratic transition and elections in July 2023. Meanwhile, resistance committees have called for marches of millions on November 13th and 17th. NASA and Spacex have launched 4 more astronauts on a flight to the International Space Station late on Wednesday. The crew includes a veteran spacewalker and 2 younger crewmates chosen to join NASA's forthcoming lunar missions. The SpaceX-built launch vehicle, consisting of a Crew Dragon capsule perched atop a 2-stage Falcon 9 rocket, climbed into the night sky from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida as its 9 Merlin engines roared to life. The flight marks the 3rd operational space station crew sent to orbit aboard a Dragon capsule since NASA and SpaceX teamed up to resume space launches from American soil last year, following a 9-year hiatus at the end of the US Space Shuttle program in 2011. It is the 4th crewed flight overall in 17 months under NASA's public-private partnership with SpaceX. Singapore has announced to stop covering the medical bills of the unvaccinated COVID-19 patients by choice from December 8th onwards. The country said that the residents who choose to remain unvaccinated and subsequently contract COVID-19 will have to bear the cost of the bills of hospitals from next month. Currently, the country puts the medical bills for Singaporeans, permanent residents and long-term pass holders. World Today Desk, DD India.
Now, Swedish centre-left Prime Minister Stefan Löfven has formally resigned, opening the way for Finance Minister Magdalena Andersson to become the country's first woman premier if she can win Parliament's approval. Löfven, a former welder and union negotiator, has headed a minority coalition since 2014 and declared earlier this year that he would step down ahead of the general election due in September 2022. In Sri Lanka, the town of Negombo remained submerged in knee-deep floodwaters on Thursday, even as Sri Lankan weather forecasters expected the recent downpours to ease in the next few days. The rains have killed 25 people in Sri